On this day in history, August 5th, 1100, Henry I is crowned King of England in Westminster Abbey. Included in the following is an excerpt from the 1944 edition of the Encyclopaedia Britannica, going over the history of the king. Henry I, born 1068, died 1135, King of England, nicknamed Beauclerc, the fourth and youngest son of William I by his queen, Matilda of Flanders, was born in 1068 on English soil. On his life before 1086, when he was solemnly knighted by his father at Westminster, we know little. He was his mother's favourite, and she bequeathed to him her English estates, which, however, he was not permitted to hold in his father's lifetime. Henry was given an excellent education, of which in later life he was proud. His attainments included Latin, which he could both read and write. He knew something of the English laws and language, and it may have been from an interest in natural history that he collected, during his reign, the Woodstock Menagerie, which was the admiration of his subjects. But from 1087 his life was one of action and vicissitudes, which left him little leisure. Receiving under the Conqueror's last dispositions a legacy of £5,000 of silver but no land, he traded upon the pecuniary needs of Duke Robert of Normandy, from whom he purchased, for the small sum of £3,000, the district of Cotentin. He negotiated with Rufus to obtain the possession of their mother's inheritance, but only incurred thereby the suspicions of the Duke, who threw him into prison. In 1090, the prince vindicated his loyalty by suppressing, on Robert's behalf, a revolt of the citizens of Rouen which Rufus had fomented. But when his elder brothers were reconciled in the next year, they combined to evict Henry from the Cotentin. He dissembled his resentment for a time, and lived for nearly 2 years in the French Vexin, in great poverty. He then accepted from the citizens of Domfort an invitation to defend them against Robert of Belesme, and subsequently, coming to an agreement with Rufus, assisted the king in making war on their elder brother Robert. When Robert's departure for the First Crusade left Normandy in the hands of Rufus, 1096, Henry took service under the latter, and he was in the royal hunting train on the day of Rufus's death, August 2nd, 1100. Had Robert been in Normandy, the claim of Henry to the English crown might have been effectually opposed, but Robert only returned to the duchy a month after Henry's coronation. In the meantime, the new king, by issuing his famous charter, by recalling Anselm, and by choosing the Anglo-Scottish princess Edith Matilda, daughter of Malcolm III, King of the Scots, as his future queen, had cemented the alliance with the Church and with the native English, which was the foundation of his greatness. Anselm preached in his favour. English levies marched under the royal banner both to repel Robert's invasion, 1101, and to crush the revolt of the Montgomerys, headed by Robert of Belesme, 1102. The alliance of the crown and church was subsequently imperiled by the question of investitures, 1103 to 1106. Henry was sharply criticized for his ingratitude to Anselm, in spite of the marked respect which he showed to the archbishop. At this juncture, a sentence of excommunication would have been a dangerous blow to Henry's power in England, but the king's diplomatic skill enabled him to satisfy the church without surrendering any rights of consequence, 1106. And he skillfully threw the blame of his previous conduct under his counsellor, Robert of Moulins. Although the Peterborough Chronicle accuses Henry of oppression in his early years, the nation soon learned to regard him with respect. William of Malmesbury, about 1125, already treats Tinchebray, 1106, as an English victory and the revenge for Hastings. Henry was disliked but feared by the baronage, towards whom he showed gross bad faith in his disregard of his coronation promises. In 1110 he banished the more conspicuous malcontents, and from that date was safe against plots of his English feudatories. With Normandy he had more trouble, and the military skill which he had displayed at Tinchebray was more than once put to the test against Norman rebels. His Norman, like his English, administration was popular with the non-feudal classes, but doubtless oppressive towards the barons. The latter had abandoned the cause of Duke Robert, who remained a prisoner in England till his death, 1134, but they embraced that Robert's son, William the Clito, whom Henry, in a fit of generosity, had allowed to go free after Tinchebray. The Norman conspiracies of 1112, 1118, and 1123-24 were all formed in Clito's interest. Both France and Anjou supported this pretender's cause from time to time. He was always a thorn in Henry's side till his untimely death at Alost, 1128, but more especially after the catastrophe of the White Ship, 1120, deprived the king of his only lawful son. But Henry emerged from these complications with enhanced prestige. His campaigns had been uneventful. His chief victory, Bremule, 1119, was little more than a skirmish. But he had held his own as a general, and as a diplomatist he had shown surpassing skill. The chief triumphs of his foreign policy were the marriage of his daughter Matilda to the Emperor Henry V, 1114, which saved Normandy in 1124, the detachment of the Pope Calixtus II from the side of France and the Clito, 1119, and the Angevin marriage which he arranged for his son William Etheling, 1119, and for the widowed Empress Matilda, 1129, after her brother's death. This latter match, though unpopular in England and Normandy, was a fatal blow to the designs of Louis VI, and prepared the way for the expansion of English power beyond the Loire. After 1124, the disaffection of Normandy was crushed. The severity with which Henry treated the last rebels was regarded as a blot upon his fame, but the only case of merely vindictive punishment was that of the poet Luc de la Barre, who was sentenced to lose his eyes for a lampoon upon the king, and only escaped the sentence by committing suicide. Henry's English government was severe and grasping, but he kept good peace, and honorably distinguished himself among contemporary statesmen in an age when administrative reform was in the air. He spent more time in Normandy than in England, but he showed admirable judgment in his choice of subordinate. Robert of Moulins, who died in 1118, and Roger of Salisbury, who survived his master, were statesmen of no common order, and Henry was free from the mania of attending in person to every detail, which was the besettling sin of medieval sovereigns. As a legislator, Henry was conservative. He issued few ordinances. The unofficial compilation known as the Legas Henrici shows that, like the Conqueror, he made it his ideal to maintain the law of Edward. His itinerant justices were not altogether a novelty in England or Normandy. It is characteristic of the man that the exchequer should be the chief institution created in his reign. The eulogies of the last Peterborough Chronicle on his government were written after the anarchy of Stephen's reign had invested his predecessor's good peace with the glamour of a golden age. Henry was respected and not tyrannous. He showed a lofty indifference to criticism such as that of Eadmer in the Histories Novorum, which was published early in the reign. He showed, on some occasions, great deference to the opinions of the magnates, but dark stories, some certainly unfounded, were told of his prison houses. Men thought him more cruel and more despotic than he actually was. Henry was twice married. After the death of his first wife, Matilda, 1080 to 1118, he took to wife Adelaide, daughter of Godfrey, Count of Louvain, 1121, in the hope of a male issue, but the marriage proved childless, and the Empress Matilda was designated as her father's successor, the English baronage being compelled to do her homage both in 1126 and again after the Angevin marriage in 1131. He had many illegitimate sons and daughters by various mistresses. Of these bastards, the most important is Robert, Earl of Gloucester, upon whom fell the main burden of defending Matilda's title against Stephen. Henry died near Gisors on December 1st, 1135, in the 36th year of his reign, and was buried in the Abbey of Reading, which he himself had founded.